What's a secret you have sworn never to tell, but you'll gladly share anonymously on the internet? Story 1. I slept with a coworker of mine for a few months. She liked me because I was the quiet type, and I was pretty new to physical relationships at the time. It lasted for about 4 months, and then she became extremely distant, trying to get me removed from the division, Navy. Everyone sided with her since they all partied with her and seemed infatuated. Eventually, she got caught sleeping with a higher-ranking supervisor, and people finally backed off from me. She was later stationed on an aircraft carrier, where she got involved with a married chief and was ultimately discharged from the Navy because of it. This girl made my life miserable for 2 years. She never found out how she was caught sleeping with that married chief, nor did she suspect that her Facebook password was unbelievably easy to guess. Back when things were still good between us, she used to log into my computer when she came over, and her email would pop up on my Facebook when I logged in. One day, out of boredom and frustration, I accidentally guessed her password and logged into her account. I couldn't believe it. I snooped around and discovered how she truly felt about me, as well as messages exchanged between her and a guy 4 ranks higher. Out of sheer spite, I forwarded those messages to the guy's wife. He ended up getting kicked out and divorced. To this day, I still feel guilty, but I also felt like his wife had the right to know. Now, she's living with the supervisor she got caught with initially, and I haven't spoken to her since. I genuinely hope she's doing well, but I know if she ever found out what I did, she'd find a way to hurt me. I haven't been in a relationship since because I'm too scared of what might happen. Story 2. When I was 4, it first happened. My stepbrother, who was about 14 at the time, came into my room and started rubbing my back. Then he began kissing me. I didn't understand what was happening because I was too young to know any better. Eventually, he was naked, and I was undressed from the waist down. You can imagine what took place afterward. This wasn't just a one-time occurrence. It happened every night for 2 years. Then he got a girlfriend, and for about a month, everything seemed fine. But then my other stepbrother, who was 15, did the same thing. This continued until he graduated from high school. Now both of them are in the military. One of them is even a Marine. I have never had the courage to tell anyone. I guess sharing this here doesn't really count, but it's the closest I've come to speaking out. I'm 20 now and I still haven't told a soul, except for you. Story 3. My mom and dad were both previously married to other people during their younger years. They each had children with their former spouses. My mom had 2 daughters from her previous marriage. By the time I was born, my youngest half-sister was about 15, and the eldest was around 18. When I was 7 or 8, my parents split up. The reason? My dad admitted to having an inappropriate relationship with my now 25-year-old sister, his stepdaughter, who was married and had children of her own at the time. It gets worse. When I was around 20, my youngest sister, the one who wasn't involved with my dad, started speculating that he might be the biological father of at least one of my other sister's kids, one of my nieces. That would explain why he bought her a car when she turned 16. To sum it up, my dad cheated on my mom with her daughter, and I might have a half-niece sister. I don't visit home very often anymore. Story 4. I was in a long-term relationship with my ex-girlfriend for almost 8 years, and we even lived together. Toward the end, we had problems like any other couple, nothing that couldn't be fixed. But then my company hired a new girl, and we ended up sleeping together, and she got pregnant. I had to break up with my girlfriend, telling her that our problems were beyond repair, which was a lie because I still loved her and wanted to be with her. She never knew the real reason. I talked to the new girl, and we decided to have an abortion. The problem was that where we live, abortion is illegal, so we ended up going to a shady illegal clinic, if you could even call it that, and she had the procedure done. That's when the real problems began. The job wasn't done correctly, and she started experiencing severe health issues. That was 9 months ago, and she's still dealing with significant medical complications. We've spent a lot of money on private clinics and doctors. I've stayed with her through all of this because her health issues are partly my fault. After 9 months, she started developing feelings for me. She even says she loves me, but I don't feel the same. If I leave her now, she wouldn't be able to afford the medical expenses on her own. I'm only staying out of the small sense of responsibility I have left. Besides the 2 of us, nobody knows about this. The only thing I know for sure is that I'm still in love with my ex-girlfriend, and I want to be with her. She wants me back too. I feel completely stuck in this situation, and it's all my fault. I'm the worst person for making two women suffer like this. Story 5. One time in middle school, a bunch of guys from the swim team and I were staying over at a friend's house because we had a meet in the morning. Around 1 a.m., I went to the kitchen to get a glass of juice and saw the family dog scratching at the door, trying to get in. Wanting to be nice, I opened the door just a crack to let it in. What I saw next was something I didn't understand at the time. I accidentally caught a glimpse of my friend's mom using a very long, double-ended black dildo while pegging my friend's dad. The dog ran in and jumped on the bed, startling them. They looked toward the door, but luckily I only saw the whole thing through a mirror reflection, so they couldn't see me, just that someone had seen them. I quickly closed the door and ran back to my friend's room, pretending nothing had happened. 15 minutes later, the mom came into the bedroom wearing a bathrobe, awkwardly telling us, "Okay, boys, time to go to bed." She scanned our faces to figure out who had seen them, but I kept my expression completely neutral. Even on the 4-hour drive to the meet the next day, I acted like nothing had happened. I never told my friend or anyone else what I saw because my friend was a hardcore, naive Christian, and I knew it would completely mess with his mind. Story 6. A few years ago, my great-aunt was involved in a terrible car accident when someone in a PT Cruiser rear-ended her at 98 miles per hour. Her car flipped and caught fire. We were all told that she died on impact. The day after her death, I was in my PE class, feeling extremely depressed. That side of my family never really cared for me, but she was one of the few who treated me with compassion, care, and love. I overheard my coach talking to two other coaches saying, "You guys heard about that terrible accident yesterday morning on highway?" "Yeah, well, my wife's boss was there. It was horrible. He saw the woman burning alive, trying to pat out the fire. People tried to pull her out or put the flames out, but it was just too intense." Hearing that, I started to panic and broke down crying. When the coach asked me what was wrong, I told him that she was my great aunt and that we had been told she died on impact. He excused me from the rest of the day. The only other person who knows the truth is my father. I told him when he picked me up from school that day. We decided to keep it from the rest of the family because it would completely devastate them to learn that she suffered. It actually feels good to finally get this off my chest. I've never told anyone else except my dad. Story 7. I was at a party once with a group of people I only knew from school. A bunch of these guys were getting really hammered and acting obnoxious. They pulled out a beer bong and started chugging beers. Suddenly, this guy named Tim, standing next to me, turned around and peed into a Dixie cup. I couldn't believe it. As we stood there, watching the others take turns with the beer bong, I impulsively grabbed the cup of pee and casually poured it into the beer bong as if nothing was wrong. My friends, who were standing around me, were completely shocked. We all froze for a moment to see if anyone else noticed, but no one did. We collectively held our breaths as the next guy stepped up to the bong and downed it like a champ. We started cheering, and somehow the guy never suspected a thing. Turns out, natty ice really does taste like piss. Story 8. I was born in England but raised in Colombia. During high school, I met this gorgeous Colombian girl. She was 16 and I was 17. We dated for a while, and she always told me to pretend to be just a classmate if her dad came home. I found it odd, but I assumed he was just overprotective. One night, while drinking with friends, I saw her dad pulling into a nearby bar. Curious, I followed to see what he was up to without being noticed. I overheard him talking to another guy around his age saying, "We have to kill this he's stealing from us." It sounded like something out of a gangster movie. I returned to my friends and didn't say anything. A week later, I was at my girlfriend's place for an informal business gathering. Her dad was there with 4 other men, and to my surprise, one of them was Julian's dad, one of my close friends. 2 weeks later, I got a call from a friend saying Julian's dad had been shot outside a bakery. At the funeral, I couldn't shake the memory of that conversation I overheard. Time passed, and I kept dating my girlfriend for over a year. One night, while drunk and playing Truth or Dare, I asked her what her dad really did for a living. She hesitated but eventually admitted that he was a drug lord. The business gathering I saw months earlier was actually a meeting to discuss production, costs, and transportation. I eventually moved back to Europe and haven't heard from her or her family since. But I still feel uneasy knowing that I might know who killed my friend's dad. I've never told anyone about this, and it feels good to finally let it out. Story 9. I was married for 15 years. I started cheating on my wife after she became addicted to painkillers. Eventually, she got clean and caught me cheating. We started going to counseling, but I continued cheating and began planning for a divorce, all while she thought we were working things out. Or so I thought. Over the next year, while we were supposedly fixing our marriage and seeing a counselor, she met a guy from another state online. They started having virtual S, and eventually she arranged to visit him for a week. She told me she was visiting an old high school friend, and I believed her completely, planning to be with my girlfriend while she was gone. While with her online boyfriend, they took some drugs, nothing major, but they mixed badly with her prescription meds. She went into cardiac arrest, the ambulance was called, and she died on the way to the hospital. The death certificate said heart attack, but our family doctor explained that it was likely caused by a drug interaction. The police questioned the guy, but he wasn't charged with anything. I chose not to press charges. He was already living with the horror of what happened. I was woken up in my girlfriend's bed by a call from the police informing me that my wife had died. I had her cremated and scattered her ashes in her favorite place, with both families present. It was a private ceremony. I spent the next year in therapy dealing with the guilt. 4 years later, I married the woman I had been cheating with. That was 2 years ago, and I'm extremely happy now. She knows everything. She's the only one who does, besides you reading this now. I still carry the guilt, though. I've left out key details to keep my identity hidden. There's no way to verify this, but it happened just as I've shared. Storytime. I'm a quiet, articulate, and polite guy who doesn't like sports and prefers the company of women over men. Because of that, when I was a freshman in college, just about everyone assumed I was gay. I wasn't overly flamboyant or anything, but if someone asked, I'd tell them I was straight. Funny enough, I knew plenty of gay guys who found it hilarious that people thought I was one of them. Because of this assumption, a lot of guys didn't mind if their girlfriends hung out in my dorm room while they were drinking and watching sports with the other guys. My room became the go-to spot for the girls to hang out, and there was no way I was going to discourage that. Long story short, over a 9-month span, I ended up sleeping with 7 girls, all of whom were girlfriends of these naive, trusting guys, including the girlfriends of my RA, my roommate, and the guy in the room next door. Basically, I was taking advantage of the misconception that I was gay to fly under the radar and hook up with their girlfriends. I guess I was kind of a man whore, using their bias to my advantage. Story 11. I'm a massive sleepwalker. I've done some crazy stuff in my time, but this incident was the first of its kind and hopefully the last. I was on holiday with a bunch of friends and we got absolutely hammered abroad. Somehow we managed to stumble back to our room unhurt and crash into bed. So far, so good. I was having a weird dream where I was playing pranks on my friends. In the dream, for some reason, I thought it would be funny to take a dump on my friend's bed. It didn't make sense, but it was just a dream. Suddenly, I woke up in that weird state where your body's trying to wake you, but your brain is still foggy. Then I started feeling wet, and that's when I really woke up. The first thing that hit me was the smell. Absolutely horrendous, like a mix of sewer, dog crap, and vodka. I was gagging from the stench. I looked around and realized I was sitting in a cupboard in the kitchen, right on the middle shelf, or rather, what was left of it, because I had snapped it in half by sitting on it. There was piss everywhere, and I was literally sitting on a pile of the nastiest crap I've ever done. Panic set in. My first instinct was to check if my friend, who I was sharing the room with for the week, was still asleep. This was friendship-ending territory. The room was an open-plan European flat, and his bedroom looked out onto everything. I tiptoed through, praying for mercy, and luckily, he was still sleeping. No idea how, because by now the whole flat reeked. I rushed back, grabbed a couple of toilet rolls, and started frantically scooping up the mess. I knew I was on borrowed time. No one could sleep through that stench for long. Eventually, I got it mostly cleaned up, but the crap had managed to seep under the cupboard. There I was, lifting this massive piece of furniture to wipe up the mess, feeling like the biggest idiot on earth. Then it hit me. I had to fix the broken shelf, which was still smeared with crap, or the hotel would charge me. Somehow I managed to balance the shelf pieces together, close the doors, and lock the cupboard. On the verge of tears, I crawled back into bed. Miraculously, my friend never found out, and the hotel never said a word. But I swear I will never forget that nightmare. Story 12. This story is known only to me. The 5 friends I experienced it with, my girlfriend, my mom, were close, and now, to you. 5 friends and I set out on an adventure to see a concert. The concert was in one city, but since we had about a day to kill, we decided to hit up a big city an hour away. None of us are from big cities, so we thought it would be a good opportunity to stretch our legs, have some beers, relax in a nice hotel room, and maybe play some cards. Here's what actually happened. We ended up buying 90 beers, staying in one of the nicest hotels I've ever seen, and playing the most messed up drinking game imaginable. This led to the idea of getting some of our younger friends into a strip club. That plan didn't work out, so someone suggested bringing the strippers to us. Cue Craigslist. We found a decent-looking stripper named Nancy. Everyone agreed, we made the call, and then the waiting began. Keep in mind, we were all completely wasted. At the time, I was in a relationship, so I decided to skip out on the stripper experience and hit up a bar to meet some locals for an hour. Just as I was getting up to leave, there was a knock at the door. I opened it, and the sight I saw left me speechless. First, a tiny, overweight girl walked in, followed by a 6-foot-tall woman with a hair lip. The shorter one was nearly a midget, probably weighing around 130 pounds. As they walked in, I turned to my friends, and their disappointed faces said it all. As I walked out, I heard one of the women say, "So, which one of you boys is the 19-year-old?" As soon as I got into the hallway, I collapsed on the floor laughing. After a smoke, I realized this was too funny to miss and went back inside. When I returned, I opened the door to find the midget, completely naked, riding one of my buddies on a table. James Brown was playing on a laptop in the background, and one of my friends was chatting up the lady pimp. I sat down and decided to DJ the Weird Dry Humping Fest, playing more James Brown tracks. The midget stripper bounced on everyone in the room except me. I started talking to the lady pimp, getting to know her and asking what it's like to be in her line of work. She was actually pretty chill. Then in my drunken state, I decided I wanted some drugs for the concert and asked if she could help. She made a phone call and told me it would be $80. I asked for collateral and she said, "I'll leave Nancy." Drunk brain, great score, drugs. About 20 minutes later, Nancy started telling us how she had only met the lady pimp about an hour before showing up. Apparently, the lady pimp gave her crack to smoke, and Nancy had no idea who she was. To top it off, Nancy admitted she had run away from home and was only 18. We all freaked out, realizing we were $200 down for the stripper and $80 down for drugs that never arrived. Nancy's story was actually pretty sad, but at that moment, we were too drunk and angry at ourselves for being so gullible. We ended up getting into a huge fight among ourselves and stayed up until 4 a.m., discussing life on a surprisingly deep level. The hangover the next day was brutal, and all I wanted was to go home and see my girlfriend. Luckily, when I finally told her, she just laughed and called us idiots. Looking back, it's one of those stories that seems too ridiculous to be true. We're all down-to-earth students, and if you met us, you'd never think we'd be capable of getting into something like that. Lesson learned, I guess. Story 13. My girlfriend's father is a Baptist minister, one of those stereotypical bigoted types who believes that fags are going to hell. Even though my girlfriend and I have lived together for a few years, he has no idea that I'm gay and she's bi. We've been friends for a long time, so he just assumes we're roommates. We rarely see him, and she doesn't want to deal with his reaction if he finds out. Sometimes he asks her to help out with church functions, and I go along to make it easier on her. Last year, during a big Easter event, a group near us started discussing marriage equality. Her father jumped right in, spewing hateful rhetoric about how homosexuality is unnatural and wicked. All that garbage we've heard a million times. I was furious but bit my tongue for her sake. Afterward, while we were putting stuff away in his office, I impulsively grabbed his big cross from the desk. My girlfriend saw me holding it, and I quickly told her I needed to use the restroom. Once I was in a stall, I masturbated with the cross. I was so angry that it felt almost cathartic to defile something that meant so much to him. When I was done, I cleaned up, put the cross back in his office, and left. Since then, every time my girlfriend has been roped into helping at the church, I go along and pick another of his personal items to defile. We laugh about it every time. It's our little revenge against his hateful beliefs. Story 14. I'll never tell my cat's original owner that he's been found. When I first took him to the vet, they scanned his microchip and gave me the number in the website to contact the owners. They even gave me a brochure with pictures of sad, crying children, telling me that some kid was probably missing their cat. But when I found him, he had a thick copper cable wrapped around his neck as a collar. He could barely meow, and there was a deep indentation around his neck that took months to heal. Why would anyone do that? You can buy a breakaway collar for less than $2. On top of that, he had a clipped ear, indicating he'd been trapped and neutered by someone else while roaming unsupervised. The vet tried to convince me that shelters sometimes clip kittens' ears before sending them to loving families, but I didn't buy it. Screw that. This cat is mine now. He's safe, happy, and well cared for, and I'm never giving him back to whoever let him get treated that way. Story 15. When I was in junior high, my family was being hunted by an organized crime group. Because of that, I had to come straight home after school every day. I would sit on the couch watching after-school TV with a sawed-off 12-gauge shotgun in my lap. Eventually, I was pulled out of school entirely, and we went into hiding. We always parked in underground garages and used rented cars to move around. I remember one terrifying moment when my brother, trying to be funny, pretended to break in through the front door. I almost shot him through the door before realizing it was just him. The police showed me countless photos to see if I could identify anyone who might have been following us. Much later, my father passed away because a doctor prescribed two incompatible medications. There was no investigation or malpractice suit, and I was told not to look into it. I've never been able to talk about any of this with anyone. Story 16. I believe that my ex-girlfriend's husband killed her. I'll try to keep it short. We were each other's first loves, dated from 15 to 21 years old. It was a passionate but toxic relationship. She had severe mental health issues, anorexia, bulimia, and other problems. We were in an abusive relationship. She would sometimes try to provoke me into hitting her. It was seriously messed up. Eventually, it ended. I always loved her and missed her, but I wouldn't go near her again after I grew out of the issues that led me to that relationship. Fast forward 10 years. I was back in my hometown for Christmas and ran into her at the grocery store. We walked to her car together. It was awkward. She laughed nervously and admitted, "I'm still crazy. I'm in a horrible marriage." I told her to leave and start over. She got serious and said, "If I tried to leave, he would kill me." I left feeling sorry for her, but also relieved not to be with her anymore. Last year, 5 years after that encounter, I heard she had died. I reached out to a family member to pay my respects and learn what happened. Her sister broke down when she realized it was me. She told me that my ex used to have unexplained broken bones and other signs of domestic abuse. She said, "I'm sure he killed her." I asked why, and she explained that a month before her death, my ex had told her, in a semi-joking way, "I'd never kill myself, so be suspicious if I do." The case was never investigated, and her body was cremated. She's gone now. I ended up writing a letter to the town's chief of police, telling him to be suspicious if the guy's current wife ever ends up hurt or dead. I have a great life now, a loving family, and I'm happy, but part of me feels guilty, like I could have saved her. I think about it every day, and I feel terrible for understanding, on some level, how someone could be pushed to that point. I still silently apologize to her for not doing more. Story 17. This is the most terrible thing I've ever done, and no one knows about it. When I was in second grade, I used to take a shortcut home with two of my friends, Henry and Freddie. We would climb over a chain link fence at the back of the school field and cut through the backyard of an abandoned house to get home. The yard was full of sagebrush, tumbleweeds, and trash stuck in the brush. One day, one of them, I can't remember which, they're twins, found a lighter. Being young and dumb, we decided to set an empty Doritos bag on fire. That wasn't enough, so we started burning other things too, until we somehow managed to start a bonfire with flames taller than us. As if burning down an empty lot wasn't bad enough, an elderly blind man came out of the old shack, waving his white cane. I can still see him clearly as the fire spread toward his house while we ran away as fast as we could. When I finally got home, it was 5 hours later than usual, and I got grounded for 2 months. I never told anyone where I had been, which only made my punishment worse. That night, the news showed footage of a house fire that happened suspiciously close to our school. Story 18. I doubt anyone will read this, but I just need to get it off my chest. I exist because of an accidental teenage pregnancy. My dad was 16 and my mom was 17. My biological mom wasn't mature enough to handle a baby, so she left me with her mother to raise. Eventually, my grandparents adopted me when I was 3. During all of this, my dad wanted to take care of me. He knew that my mom's parents wouldn't raise me well, and he wanted to make sure I was all right. I wasn't. Being raised by my grandparents, I was treated like an outsider and endured emotional, verbal, and physical abuse from both my grandfather and his daughter. I grew up feeling isolated, and it led to severe self-esteem issues, an eating disorder, and anxiety. I even attempted suicide. No one knows that I'm aware of the custody battle between my dad and my grandparents. It didn't last long, but I know I would have been happier and more well-adjusted if my dad had raised me. Now that I'm an adult and have gotten to know him, I realize how alike we are and how much better my life could have been. I wish he had fought harder for me back then. Now I just have to make up for lost time. Story 19. This is a long post, but I need to get it off my chest. When I was a kid, my parents fought a lot. I was a sensitive child, so yelling and arguments terrified me. I always feared that they would divorce, and I couldn't imagine life without both of them. Looking back, I realized they were probably just stressed from working so hard to support our family as immigrants. When I was 16, they got into a terrible argument over something minor. In the chaos, my dad hit my mom, and she retaliated by pushing him backward, somehow dislocating his thumb. I don't know the full story as they never acknowledged that it happened afterward. I'll never forget the moment I saw the door fly open, and my mom came running down the hallway, her face bloody, screaming for me to call the police. I was so scared I didn't know what to do. Instead of calling the police, I called a family friend who took my dad to the hospital. I stayed home to console my mom until she fell asleep. Afterward, I went into a robotic state, cleaning up the bloodstains with a brush and water. The next day, I went to school as if nothing had happened. The memory haunted me, and one night while drinking with two friends, I blurted out, "My dad hit my mom." They didn't take me seriously since we were all tipsy, and their nervous laughter just made me cry harder. Since that incident, I've never talked about my family with anyone. My friends think I come from a privileged, happy family, but they have no idea. Sometimes I secretly wish my parents would get divorced. I know it's selfish, but I just want the fighting and tension to end. I feel terrible for wishing it, but I can't help but feel that way. Story 20. This is actually my mother's story, and she has allowed me to share it with all of you. It's not something we'd ever share with anyone we know. When my mother was younger, she used to work as a dancer. And one particular evening, she and one of her co-workers, a woman, were hired to perform at a celebration event for a large number of football teams. It was their end-of-season gathering, so naturally they wanted some entertainment. The event was held in a large recreation hall, and they performed their show as usual. Essentially, it was two dancers and about 100 guys watching, drinking, and having a good time. Just a typical night. After they finished, they started packing up and chatting with some of the guys, one of them being the boyfriend of my mother's co-worker, the one with her that night. Suddenly, the men began talking about a game they play every year, and getting excited about it, asked the two of them to stay and help with the game. Naturally, they were both confused and a little wary, but they cautiously agreed. The atmosphere didn't seem alarming, and they knew several people there. Here's where it gets bizarre. Out of nowhere, two chairs and a bucket appeared, placed in the middle of the hall, with the bucket on the floor and the two chairs facing the bucket and each other. The co-worker's boyfriend and another man sat down in the chairs. Then one of the men explained that these two were the current and past champions of the game, which still hadn't been explained to either woman. It was then that my mother noticed that the bucket was filled with water and about 100 coins. Amid the cheers of the crowd, the men finally revealed the purpose of the game. The two women were supposed to reach into the bucket of water, grab a coin, and drop it into the open hand of one of the men, who had positioned their hands to create a sort of makeshift container. The goal was to see who could hold more coins without dropping any. Speechless for a moment, my mother and her co-worker finally, hesitantly, agreed, with the co-worker helping her boyfriend and my mother helping the other. It should be mentioned that my mother has always had very long, curved fingernails, about an inch long. She was careful to drop the coins gently, as close as possible, without actually touching the man's hand, despite the crowd encouraging her to just drop them in directly. The man flinched each time her nails got near him, which probably made the situation even more awkward. During this process, she also realized that the coins were in a bucket of water for lubrication. Apparently, this game had been played many times before. She never asked how such a tradition started. Although my mother doesn't remember exactly who won, She thinks it might have been the boyfriend. She did come away with the most random fact of all: the surprising number of coins one person can hold in their hands during a strange and unexpected game. Story 21. This is going to be the absolute first time I have ever shared this. Well, written it down in my entire life. I will probably never mention it again. I'm doing this just to see how I feel. Let's start by saying that I think there's something wrong with me emotionally. I feel like I'm messed up in the head. Usually when kids go through traumatic experiences, they end up having issues. But I don't feel messed up, and that worries me. I think I would feel better if someone just said, "Dude, you're crazy, you need to see someone." But nobody ever does, so I assume I'm normal. Just for context, I'm a guy. You might wonder what happened. Well, when I was younger, I'm not sure exactly how young, but really young, my older brother somehow convinced me that sleeping together without clothes was something everyone did. This eventually led to inappropriate behavior and essentially abuse. It's a bit blurry in my memory. This happened frequently. I somehow believed it was normal, so I never brought it up or had issues. The only reason it stopped was that he used to finish elsewhere. But then he started finishing on me. At that age, I thought it was thick pee, and my logic was that even if what we were doing was normal, peeing on someone didn't seem right. So I confronted him, said I didn't want to do it anymore, and threatened to tell someone about the pee. That made it stop. A few years later, my mom took the family savings, gambled it all away, and cheated on my dad. The night she came home and confessed everything, I was sitting in the kitchen. My mom and dad had a huge fight about it. Afterward, my mom told me to look after my sister, and then went into the kitchen and started hurting herself. Long story short, she didn't succeed in harming herself severely, but she's on medication now and struggles with her mental health. These are the two major stories, but I have others. Stories of being drugged by someone and waking up without clothes. Stories where friends said I got drunk and completely changed my personality, not recognizing anyone. So many weird situations. And yet here I am, and I want to say, I feel pretty normal, and that kind of freaks me out. I try to ask people about my personality, and everyone thinks I'm just some average, nerdy guy. I have a normal lifestyle, married, friends, and so on. I feel unaffected, but I'm so worried. I read about people who go through just one major incident and end up in therapy for years because they're so broken by it. And here I am, not feeling anything? I could go on and on about this, but for now, I'm just glad I finally expressed it. Story 22. The moment I saw this post, I knew exactly what I wanted to share. Two people within my group of friends started hooking up casually. It was college, so think friends with benefits, but with more drinking involved. Let's call her the girl and him the guy. The girl was one of my then-girlfriend's friends, and the guy was a good friend of mine whom I played rugby with. After a couple of months, my buddy moved on and started hooking up with other girls. One night, I noticed the girl was visibly upset. I assumed it was because she knew the guy was seeing other women. Later that night, she got drunk and confessed to me that the guy had gotten her pregnant. She said she knew he didn't care about her, and she had an abortion without telling anyone, except her mom, who had recently disowned her. I tried to comfort her and offered the best advice I could, suggesting she seek professional help or counseling. She made me promise not to tell anyone, especially my girlfriend or the guy. It's been 5 years since that night. She moved out of state, but I still see my rugby buddy often. I've never told him. It's been a heavy burden, and it feels good to finally share it with someone. Story 23. When I was a kid, about 7 years old at the time, I had a Superman badge, one of those you get with your birthday cards. It's hard for me to remember all the details, but I remember having a friend over from school, and we were playing superheroes or something like that, wearing our birthday badges that we had collected that year. I was just a typical, thoughtless kid back then and didn't let my younger brother play with us because I wanted to have private superhero time with my school friend. My brother was about 4 or 5 at the time. After a while, we went back inside after leaping around the backyard with pillowcase capes and invisible force fields, and we played some Nintendo 64 for about an hour. We had left our superhero costumes and badges outside. I remember my mom coming in and asking where Darren was, my brother, and I just shrugged and said, "I don't know." The next thing I knew, I heard the most blood-curdling scream I've ever heard in my life. My friend and I dropped our N64 controllers and ran outside. My little brother was crumpled on the ground at the base of the garden, having jumped off the deck, about 25 feet, onto the concrete below. He was wearing my cape and my badge. 2 days later, he died in the hospital from severe brain hemorrhaging. I feel so guilty. If I had just let him play with us and wasn't so selfish about it, he'd probably still be alive. I could have explained the game to him, told him it was all pretend, and he wouldn't have tried to fly. I've never told anyone about this before. My family just assumed he was climbing the rail and fell. I'm the only one who knows that he actually thought he could fly with the cape and badge on because he heard me say it. Story 24. I guess I never promised not to tell this, but it's a funny story that I've never shared with anyone. When I was about 5 years old, I was playing in my backyard when the girl next door, who was around the same age, called me over to play. I went to her yard and we kicked a ball around and played with some other toys. Then she decided she wanted to have a tea party. I thought, ugh, that's girl stuff. Her parents had set up a tent in the backyard as a little playhouse, complete with a small table and chairs. We went inside and she set up her tea set. We had a little pretend tea party, and once we were done, she put her tea set away and told me she wanted to show me something. She stood up, pulled down her stockings and underwear, sat down on her back and spread her legs. I just sat there in shock. At that moment, the tent flap opened, and it was her mom. She completely freaked out, lots of yelling and commotion. I think she might have told my mom, but my mom never said anything to me about it. This was years ago, but it still feels like it happened yesterday. Sometimes I wonder what became of her. Stripper? Happily married? I guess I'll never know. I just remember thinking, what the heck was that? Story 25. Back in 2006, my uncle was in Egypt trying to get both of his cars back to the States to sell them. He wasn't sure if it was a good idea, but he needed the money, so he decided to go ahead. One day, while discussing the situation with his friend at a coffee shop, a random guy overheard the conversation and offered to help. 2 weeks later, my uncle returned to the States. Usually the cars would have been shipped by then, but nothing arrived. When we asked him about it, he said he had already sold them. A few days later, while I was helping him with something at his house, he confessed that he never actually sold the cars. It turns out that the guy who overheard him at the coffee shop was Israeli and called his friends to assist him. They held my uncle at gunpoint, demanded that he hand over the cars, and took a bag containing $10,000 from the sale of his restaurant. My uncle never told anyone else in the family, not even his 6 siblings, about what really happened. Story 26. When I was in 3rd grade, I was assaulted by a family friend who was in his late 20s. He visited us and stayed at our apartment for 2 weeks. I would cry silently and exhaust myself to sleep, but I never told anyone. Growing up, I was taught that a man should always be strong and deal with his own problems, so I kept quiet. I was also bullied at school for being a fat, geeky kid, and I felt like I had no one to turn to. Around 8th grade, I decided to change my life. I stopped eating junk food, started sprinting, and trained on stairs. I also began studying human physiology, vital points, nerve bundles, and picked up some basic martial arts moves from the internet. During high school, I had a few chances to be intimate with girls, but I couldn't perform. I broke down once and cried in front of a girl, but I couldn't explain why. She introduced me to her friend, who then confided in me that she was being abused by her biological father whenever her mom and little sister were out of town. He threatened to hurt her sister if she spoke up. For the first time, I felt like I could open up and share my own story. We skipped school to practice self-defense and support each other. Eventually, I went to college out of state, while she stayed local to protect her sister. One autumn break, I visited family and found out that the man who assaulted me years ago was visiting too. My rage resurfaced. One day, I caught him alone and acted submissive, tricking him into thinking I was still under his control. When he tried to make a move, I bit down on him and lost control. I don't remember much, but he ended up paralyzed from the waist down, claiming it was a freak accident. I called my friend and told her what I did. She was shocked, but gradually accepted it. A few months later, her father tried to assault her again. This time she fought back, and when he threatened to harm her sister, she snapped and suffocated him with a pillow after he collapsed from a heart attack. After the funeral, she told me that while she knew I meant well, she felt I had made her a murderer and never wanted to see or hear from me again. I respected her wishes but spiraled into heavy drinking and drugs during college. I nearly failed a semester but managed to get back on track. Now at 23, I have a decent paying job, but I still spent a lot on substances. I'm not suicidal, but nothing feels as satisfying as the revenge I took. My ambitions, career goals, relationships, they all feel pointless. I just don't know where to go from here. Story 27. Back in high school, there was this cute classmate of mine who had a noticeable issue with odor. It was as if she ran marathons every day without ever showering. The other guys constantly complained about the smell, yet they still wanted to get with her because of her impressive figure. One day, I had to arrive at school really early, around 5 a.m., to practice on the new Yamaha keyboard the school had purchased. I planned to use it in the upcoming play instead of my old one. When I got there, I noticed the gym lights were on and heard some noise. Curious, I went to check it out. I cracked the door open and saw about a dozen male students from the inter-school soccer league with the girl and her friend. It became apparent that she had been involved with numerous guys, multiple times a week. Afterwards, she would just get dressed and go to class like nothing had happened. I stayed for a few seconds, mostly because I was in shock. This was back in the pre-internet days in a conservative community where people rarely talked about let alone openly engage in it. The looks of satisfaction on both of their faces still haunt me a bit. As I got older, I realized how surreal the whole situation was. Fast forward to now, she's the new team manager at my company and I report directly to her. My annual performance review is coming up, and the irony isn't lost on me. Story 28. I'm not sure how to start. This is more of a confession of many secrets, I guess. I regularly experience severe depression, sometimes even suicidal thoughts. Whenever I'm near a bridge or a tall building, I have to step away from the edge to stop myself from jumping. The only thing that truly makes me happy is music, but my parents often take away my iPod for the smallest reasons. On top of that, I have sensitive ears, and my iPod volume gives me tinnitus because I can't seem to get it quiet enough. I don't have many friends, and my family life is pretty dysfunctional. I've never been in a relationship. I'm essentially addicted to sugar and the internet. Both are slowly taking over my life. I'm also incredibly lazy. I only get good grades because my parents expect it. To be honest, I've cheated on almost every test to meet their expectations. Sometimes I feel happy, but I wouldn't call it true joy. I have no body fat, so I get cold very easily. I constantly worry about everything and feel insecure and powerless. The only thing I'm genuinely passionate about is classical music, but I'm not skilled enough for music school and rarely practice. My life feels like a lie, and I just don't know how to change it. Story 29. I imagine this might get lost in the mix, but I really need to get it off my chest. One of my closest friends, who also happens to be my ex-girlfriend, and I might still have feelings for her, plans to take her own life. Not soon, but before she turns 30. Her own words. She was abused as a child, has struggled with self-harm, though it's been 2 weeks since her last incident, and deals with severe anxiety. She's very self-conscious about her weight, around 140 pounds at 5 feet 1 inch, and has been battling depression for years. She first dealt with it in 7th grade, managed to overcome it somewhat, but now it's back in full force as a sophomore. I'm doing everything I can to support her because I care about her deeply, but I'm secretly terrified that I might fail. She hasn't told anyone else about her intentions because she doesn't want anyone to know when she goes through with it. She believes no one cares enough to notice her absence. I feel like telling other people might make things worse, so I'm keeping it between us, hoping that in the years to come, I can help her see life differently. I just don't know if I'm enough. Story 30. When my boyfriend and I first started dating, we discussed the possibility of an open relationship. One night we went to a party where I ended up kissing a mutual friend. We both got really drunk, and at some point the friends started getting more intimate. He took off my panties and was about to go further. It suddenly hit me that my boyfriend and I hadn't set clear boundaries yet, so I stopped him. A moment later, my boyfriend walked into the room, and the friend quickly left. Later, my boyfriend admitted that seeing me kiss other guys made him uncomfortable. I've never told him that my panties actually came off that night, and the friend claims he doesn't remember anything from that night. It's been about a year since it happened, and I don't see that friend anymore. I'm still with my boyfriend, and we live together now. It eats me up every time I think about it, and I wish I could take back that night entirely. Story 31. My niece, let's call her N, drowned, and I volunteered to collect her personal belongings and drive her car back to her parents' house. For context, N had been sent to a junior rehab program earlier that year, but in the last few months of her life, it seemed like she had turned things around. She graduated high school, was just a few weeks away from turning 18, and the autopsy showed no intoxicating substances in her system. Despite that, her grandmother, my dad's first wife, let's call her G, insisted that we search the car to make sure there wasn't any alcohol or drug paraphernalia hidden inside. We didn't find anything illegal except a few firecrackers, but we did come across a film camera. This was back in 1999 when digital cameras were rare. G told me to take out the film and throw it away since she didn't know how. Instead of tossing it, I slipped the film into my pocket. I wasn't sure what to do with it, but eventually I decided to develop it myself. The pictures showed N at a party. Everyone was drinking, clearly underage, but they all looked happy, including N. I thought about showing the pictures to her parents, but I couldn't decide whether seeing N drinking would make them feel better or worse. In the end, I misplaced some of the prints and the negatives. Now with only a few photos left, I can't bring myself to tell her parents the truth. It just doesn't seem right when I don't even have all the pictures anymore. Story 32. My wife and I have, or had, a theoretically open relationship. The idea was that if either of us developed feelings for someone else, we wouldn't deny it. Not just casual hookups, but something deeper, where the other person genuinely meant something. It was mostly theoretical because neither of us is particularly outgoing or actively looking. Then unexpectedly, I met someone and developed strong feelings for her. Best I could tell, the feelings were mutual. I stayed honest with my wife throughout, and to my surprise, she remained true to her convictions. She even helped me plan dates with this new person. After those dates, my wife would want to hear all the details, and it turned out that hearing about it actually excited her. I realized that her supposedly low S drive was more about finding the right kind of stimulation, and hearing those stories was a big part of it. Things eventually became awkward between me and the other woman. I guess girlfriend would be the right term, but it felt more significant than that. We're still friends, though there was a rough patch for a while. Meanwhile, my wife kept encouraging me to reconcile with her and continue the relationship. Now my wife is pregnant, and her already low S drive has hit new lows. Oddly enough, she keeps bringing up my friend, almost as if she wants to outsource intimacy while she's not in the mood. I'm honestly conflicted. My wife insists that we can't ever tell anyone else about this, but at the same time, she really wants me to pursue the relationship with my friend. It doesn't seem fair to my friend, who's at a different stage in her life now and looking for stability. I love both of these women deeply. It feels strange to be in love with two people at once, and it's even weirder that my pregnant wife is not only okay with it, but actively wants me to reconnect. I'm just not sure how to handle any of this. Story 33. A few years ago, I was on a company trip to Hawaii. On the first night, some coworkers and I were sitting at the bar having drinks. There were about 500 people from our company at the resort, so we practically took over the whole place. After a few hours, the bar was a chaotic mess, with everyone drinking way too much. I was sitting at a table with a few colleagues when an older woman approached us. We were around 21 to 23 years old, and she looked to be in her late 30s. She immediately started hitting on my friend, whispering provocative things in his ear, and complimenting his looks. After about 5 minutes, my friend and I exchanged glances, and I gave him the approving nod that basically said, "Yeah, man, go for it." They got up and walked down to the beach area, disappearing for about an hour. The next morning, we were having breakfast in the dining hall when I spotted the woman from the night before. She was sitting at a table with two kids and her husband. Then came the shocking realization her husband was the vice president of our company. She made a few awkward, guilty glances toward our table, but her husband seemed completely unaware. I later asked my friend if she had mentioned being married, but he swore she hadn't. To this day, neither of us has told anyone about that night. We both still work for the same company, and so does the VP. Story 34. I used to work for the state's registry of births, deaths, and marriages, and while I was there, I found out something shocking about one of my best friends. He has a half-brother that he doesn't know about. Here's the backstory. My friend's mom divorced her abusive husband and remarried when my friend was about 8. My friend doesn't remember his biological father fondly and considers his stepfather, who legally adopted him, as his real dad. His new dad and mom never had more children, so he was essentially raised as an only child. He never seemed bothered by it until recently, when my own siblings started getting married and having kids. He mentioned that he wished he had siblings. We're both gay, and he doesn't plan on having children, so having extended family would mean a lot to him. I found out about his half-brother because I knew my friend had changed his name as a kid, and while working at the registry, I thought it would be a funny surprise to look up his records. I was warned against looking up friends or family members' records, mostly for privacy reasons, but also to avoid the burden of unwanted knowledge. I didn't listen, and after I saw the record, I instantly understood why that rule existed. So, I discovered that my friend has a half-brother. I know his half-brother's name, the area he lives in, not far from my friend, and that he has 2 kids, meaning my buddy is technically an uncle. I can't bring myself to tell him because his biological father is a part of his life he has chosen to forget. For all I know, this half-brother could be a terrible person, so I try to convince myself that my friend would never want to know. But sometimes I wonder, what if he would actually want to meet him? It's a burden I'll probably carry alone. Story 35. I suffer from severe depression, and after trying therapy, counseling, and more antidepressants than I can count, I finally found one that sort of worked. I was taking it for a while, but my family, being as ignorant as they are, believe that all medications are poison. They forced me to stop taking them, convinced that being suicidal was somehow preferable to taking meds. Coming off antidepressants was rough, and I was determined to get them back one way or another. My family kept a close watch on my finances to make sure I wasn't buying more, and I couldn't use cash because they would instantly assume I was buying antidepressants. Ridiculous, I know. What kind of family does that? Since I'm a chemist, I decided to make the medication myself. I set up a clandestine lab and synthesized medically pure antidepressants for personal use. I made enough in one batch to last me a few years, then packed up the lab and hid it. Eventually, my family found the lab equipment in a box and assumed I was making illegal street drugs. I didn't bother correcting them and just admitted to it. They freaked out and gave me a hard time, but since they're so obsessed with saving face, they didn't report me to the police. Instead, they punished me and restricted most of my privileges. Thankfully, they never found my stash of antidepressants, and I'm still using them to this day. Story 36. I knew this girl over the internet for about a year or two. We kept in touch while I was deployed to Afghanistan and really hit it off. She would send me dirty emails, which I saved on my laptop since Big Brother over there monitored everything. We planned to meet up when I got back, get a hotel room, and just go wild. We had talked over webcam a few times, and I knew she wasn't a perfect 10, but when we finally met up, it was different than I expected. She was much bigger in person, probably around 250 pounds. I tried my best to be polite and nice, but all I could think about was how different she looked from what I imagined. I spent the entire time trying to avoid intimacy without hurting her feelings. Afterward, when I went back to my home station, I basically cut all ties with her. I blocked her on AIM and Skype, deleted the emails, and even re-rolled my game character to avoid her. I pretty much put her out of my mind. Fast forward about a year and a half. I had been enjoying life back home, drinking, going out with friends, hooking up with random women. Right before my second deployment to Afghanistan, I suddenly remembered her and got curious about what happened to her. I checked her old MySpace page, but it hadn't been updated for over a year, which was weird because she used to update it constantly. I decided to Google her name just to see if anything came up. That's when I found out she had died in a severe storm a few months after I stopped talking to her. For whatever reason, I've always felt guilty about that. Story 37. I know someone who, while engaged to someone else, took advantage of an adult special needs woman. His fiancée knows, the woman's family knows, and a few other people, about 10 in total, are aware of it. He doesn't know that I know, and most people around us have no idea. Due to the nature of my relationship with him, I can't tell anyone. Those of us who are aware keep a close eye on him. The woman he took advantage of is still part of the same social group, which makes it even more complicated. Her family and the woman herself have insisted that we don't take any further action, only to keep an eye on him. Since he doesn't know I'm aware of what happened, it actually helps me monitor him better because he doesn't know to be cautious around me. His fiancée moved back in with him after the incident. She was living somewhere else when it happened. And now she seems to follow him everywhere. He doesn't have a car, so she's always his ride. I still can't believe she didn't leave him after finding out. I try to practice forgiveness and understanding, But there are lines you just don't cross. This situation makes me question a lot about human nature, and I still struggle with how to handle it. Story 38. When I was around 10 years old, my stepdad wanted to buy a new recliner. So my mom, my stepdad, and I went to a local furniture store to check out the options. We were browsing the cheapest choices when we found a ridiculously underpriced chair. One of those really nice ones that you'd usually hesitate to spend money on. Since there were 5 kids between my mom and stepdad, this was a rare treat for him. We brought the recliner home, and my stepdad was thrilled. It was immediately established as his chair, like a good-natured version of the classic "get out of my chair" thing. Of course, because it was new, everyone got to sit in it for a minute. It was a Saturday, and since we had been out all morning, we decided to rest. My parents went to their room and I went to mine. I guess my older siblings were out, so I was the only kid home. After my parents went to their room, I sneaked out to sit in the new chair. I felt pretty clever since no one was supposed to sit in it while my stepdad was around. I thought I'd take a quick nap there, so I leaned back and pushed my body weight against the back of the chair. Now I was a pretty petite girl, about 100 pounds and around 5 feet 3 inches. Considering how cheap the chair was, I guess it wasn't made to withstand much pressure. As I leaned back, the back of the chair snapped off. The fabric stayed attached, but the internal mechanisms just broke. I was frozen in shock, terrified. I quickly pushed the chair back into its upright position, making it look as normal as possible, and rushed back to my room. From a distance, the damage didn't look too bad, aside from a slight gap between the fabric pieces. Somehow, I managed to fall asleep. When I woke up an hour or two later, I realized no one had woken me up to yell at me about the broken recliner. For a few seconds, I thought I might have gotten away with it. Then I started to panic, thinking maybe my parents were just waiting for me to wake up to confront me or were planning some kind of punishment. When I finally left my room, I walked into the living room and did a double take. There was my stepdad sitting in his old recliner, while the new chair was lying flat on its back in the middle of the room. My stepdad just sat there silently, and I couldn't help but give him a look that said, "What did you do?" To this day, I have no idea how I kept a straight face. I can only imagine the moment when his 6-foot frame toppled backward out of the new chair. The way he just sat there, defeated in his old recliner. It's still one of the funniest things I've ever witnessed. Story 39. I fell in love with my best friend, a woman, who has been dating an old college buddy of mine for the past 5 years. We always clicked because it was purely platonic at first. We just understood each other completely, almost like soulmates but with different anatomies. I thought my feelings were one-sided, so I kept them buried until one night when she admitted that she was in love with me too. That night we hooked up, and it was the only time in my life, despite having been with dozens of other partners and having 2 long-term relationships, that I ever truly felt like I was making love to someone. We spent the whole night talking, like we were getting to know each other for the first time. We made a pact that night to wait at least a year after she broke up with my buddy before pursuing anything serious to give him time to heal. But here we are, a year later, and she's still with him. I wake up every day feeling the same combination of despair, anger, and guilt. She made her choice to stay with him, even though he's honestly kind of a useless, unmotivated guy. The reasons she gave for staying wouldn't make sense to anyone, including me. I can't hang out with my old friends anymore because it just feels wrong. I want to be happy, but I can't shake the guilt of wanting her when it would hurt my friend. I know I sound selfish, but I've never loved anyone the way I love her, and it just feels like the universe played a cruel joke on me. There, I said it. I fell in love in the worst possible way. Story 40. Last summer, I was making money as a pot dealer. I wasn't a big-time dealer or anything, but I had a steady customer base. One night, I met this guy at a party who offered to sell me a pound of weed for $1,500. I didn't know him well, but I knew a lot of other people at the party, so I figured he was trustworthy. I convinced a friend to pitch in $400, and the 2 of us met the guy at a Fred Meyer parking lot. We got into his Ford Explorer, and everything seemed cool at first. Just a friendly conversation with the driver. Suddenly, the car sped up to about 45 miles per hour down a residential street, and that's when things went bad. A guy popped up from behind the back seat with a knife and started slashing at us. My friend got the worst of it, but I ended up with a deep stab wound on my hand that required stitches. We were robbed of $1,100. a massive loss for a kid who had just finished his senior year of high school.